Welcome to The Explainer. If you've watched any modern football recently, you already know the flanks have turned into an absolute war zone. The players operating out wide are no longer just out there to put in a shift, they've become the most dynamic, demanding, and frankly chaotic pieces on the tactical chessboard. We are, of course, talking about the crazy evolution of the wingback.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to take a structured journey today, starting with the baseline definitions, tracing the history, exploring the physical anatomy, and then getting into the wild taxonomy of the modern wingback types before finishing up with the overarching tactics.
But before we get into the evolution, we really need to clearly define our baseline and understand the fundamental difference here.
Think about the traditional fullback. They operate within a back four. Their starting position is deeper, naturally closer to their center backs, and historically, their main job has been defensive, specifically locking down the opposition's wingers in one-on-one duels. But jump over to the wingback and it's a totally different beast. This player operates in a back three or a back five. Because they have that extra central defender behind them, their starting height is way higher up the pitch. They're given this immense freedom to venture forward aggressively, because in a lot of systems, they are the team's primary and sometimes the only provider of attacking width.
And that makes the wingback a true tactical chameleon. You're essentially asking one single player to be a defender, a midfielder, and a winger, all at the exact same time. They have to cover the entire flank on their own, which completely blurs the lines of traditional football positions.
So how did we get here? Let's move to the timeline and trace how this role morphed from a defensive anchor into an absolute attacking weapon.
Let's see how this builds over time. You go all the way back to the 1920s with the WM formation, which first introduced the concept of three center backs. But the real spark didn't happen until the 1960s with Helenio Herrera's Inter Milan and their deep, counter-attacking 5-3-2, which specifically tasked wide players with covering massive ground. Then, boom, the 1990s hit. Players like the legendary Roberto Carlos sparked a total attacking revolution. He was literally an attacking weapon deployed from deep. Fast forward to the 2010s, and managers like Antonio Conte took this attacking blueprint and institutionalized it, making the 3-5-2 and 3-4-3 systems incredibly popular across Europe, with teams like Juventus and Chelsea.
To really grasp how massive this shift is, just listen to Manchester United legend Gary Neville. He pointed out that back in his era, training was brutally focused on defense, your foot positioning, your hips, your recovery runs. Allowing a cross to come in was practically a crime. It was a high-discipline, strictly defensive baseline.
Now contrast Neville's old-school mindset immediately with this quote from Danny Rose, talking about his time under Mauricio Pochettino at Tottenham. He was told to play with the same arrogance as Real Madrid's Marcelo. That is a massive philosophical shift. We literally went from never get caught out of position to go out there and act like the best attacker on the pitch.
Now, to survive this evolution, you need a very specific set of tools. Let's dig into the data and the extreme physical demands required to play the role today.
And this brilliantly illustrates the statistical explosion that followed that shift in philosophy. Back in the 2011-2012 Premier League season, only 5 wide defenders created 20 or more chances. Just 4 seasons later, that number skyrocketed to 21. Wide defenders became primary playmakers almost overnight.
But here's the catch. Producing those kinds of attacking numbers while still doing your defensive duties requires a superhuman profile. We are talking about elite aerobic capacity and repeat sprintability. You need explosive acceleration to beat a man and the recovery speed to sprint all the way back when you lose the ball. You need crossing accuracy under intense pressure, the high-level tactical timing to know exactly whether to overlap outside or underlap inside, and the defensive awareness to transition instantly when the ball changes hands. Honestly, playing wingback today is basically a brutal fitness test disguised as a football position.
Because the demands are so wild, the position has completely splintered. Get ready because we're doing a rapid-fire breakdown of the 9 wildly varied ways this role is interpreted right now.
First up, the classic touchline. The blueprint here is super simple. Run straight, hug the line, cross, and repeat. It's pure width and pure lungs. Then you have the inverted wingback. This player completely ignores the touchline and steps inside to midfield, basically treating the pitch like a giant geometry problem to create central overloads and confuse the opponent's press. Third is the box-to-box. This player has unlimited stamina. They are the absolute engine of the flank, attacking and defending equally, like they're running a marathon with studs on.
Continuing our speed run, we have the aggressive pressing wingback. Think of them as the flank hitman. They don't just sit in a defensive block, they snap into duels high up the pitch, bringing organized violence right to the touchline. Contrast that with the attacking wingback. who is basically a winger in witness protection. They live in the final third, and defending is totally an afterthought. But if things get too chaotic, a manager will use the defensive wingback. This is pure football realism. They act as a third center back stationed on the wing, prioritizing shape and protecting the far post over making any glamorous overlapping runs.
Rounding out the classic 9, we've got the underlapping wingback, or the ghost runner. Instead of going wide, they sneak inside the half space between the opposition's fullback and center back, arriving completely unmarked. Then there's the crossing merchant. The tactic here is pure volume. Spam crosses into the box until something eventually goes in. It isn't always pretty, but it creates intense aerial pressure. And finally, the playmaker. Think of them like a quarterback on the touchline. Instead of just dribbling, they receive the ball deep and use incredible line-breaking vision to ping diagonal passes across the pitch.
So the crucial point is that elite football has combined all of these distinct styles into the ultimate multi-tool, the hybrid wingback, or the system breaker. This is a modern monster. Depending on the exact phase of play, they will overlap, underlap, invert, press high, or drop deep. They don't just have one style. They adapt in real time to whatever the manager's system demands.
Because of this insane complexity, data analysts and scouts don't just look for good wide players anymore, they look for exact systemic fits. A high and wide sprinter is perfect for teams relying on fast transitions. An inverted link player is absolutely vital for possession-heavy teams using wide rotations. A creative final third threat fits teams that funnel their attack out wide, while a defensive enforcer is the exact puzzle piece needed for compact low-block teams. It's entirely about mapping the player's specific archetype to the team's overarching game model.
So, what does this all mean for the big picture? Let's get into the tactical trade-offs and how these roles will dictate the 2026 World Cup.
Whenever a manager commits to using wingbacks, they're making a massive gamble. The pros are undeniable, right? You get extra center back coverage defensively, permanent attacking width, incredible transition speed, and you completely prevent central overloads. But consider the cons. The recovery distances are absolutely huge. If a wingback loses the ball high up the pitch, the space left behind is practically a runway for the opposition. And the sheer physical toll inevitably leads to fatigue-induced errors, making it a highly rewarding yet sometimes suicidal tactical risk.
And managing that risk is going to be the defining theme of the 2026 World Cup. Mundial Analytics predicts the tournament will be defined by 5 core tactical trends. We're going to see teams using controlled pressing in waves rather than frantic 90-minute running. We'll see ruthless transition speeds. Crucially, teams will rely heavily on solid rest defense, which is the defensive structure you maintain while you're attacking, often utilizing inverted fullbacks stepping into midfield to control second balls and stop counters. And with limited international training time, simplified, highly efficient set pieces are going to be gold dust. The wingback is the key player in executing almost all of these trends.
What makes international tournament football so fascinating is how dynamically these shapes shift based on the game state. At 0-0, teams use their wingbacks for risk management, probing patiently. If they take the lead, those wingbacks might drop deeper to protect the center, keeping just one high as a counterattack outlet. But if a team is trailing, all bets are off. They abandon their rest defense entirely, push those wingbacks aggressively into the final third, and rely on transition specialists to just force an equalizer.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale, 104. That is the staggering number of matches the expanded 2026 World Cup will feature, complete with a grueling format and extensive travel. With the crazy physical demands placed on modern wingbacks, there's no way a single player can sprint up and down the touchline every 3 days for a month. Deep squads, rotational depth, and supreme tactical flexibility are going to be more crucial than ever before to survive this tournament.
Which brings us to a final, provocative thought. Given everything we've unpacked today, the history, the demanding physical data, the incredible variety of roles from inverted playmakers to pressing hitmen, it begs a massive question. When you watch the next big match, look at the players running the flanks. Are they still just wide defenders? Or have they evolved into entire tactical systems on legs? I'll let you be the judge of that. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep your eyes on the touchline.